city dominated by new, shiny skyscrapers, one Triton Square is a statement. British Land and Arup recently redeveloped this 1990s office, proving that you can take a building, recycle most of it, and still attract some of the biggest tenants in the world. I've come to London to find out how they did it. Built in the late 90s, One Triton Square was a JP Morgan back office for 2 decades. But as the 2018 lease expiry approached, British Land teamed up with original designers at Arup once again to breathe new life into the building. As you can see, One Triton Square is still empty, but in a few months it'll be the new home of Facebook, or Meta as it's now known, which is moving in from just across the street. Of course, a lot changes in 20 years. We need less office space now, there are fewer filing cabinets and more files somewhere in the cloud, and priorities change as well.
Time was moving on rapidly in terms of how far sustainability was moving up the agenda. By 2018, we now had a planning permission to extend the building, and we realised it was an amazing opportunity to save huge amount of embodied carbon within the design. So once we saw that there was an opening there, we pushed the designers, we pushed Arup further and further to absolutely maximise that opportunity. So we were able to achieve a BREEAM outstanding score of 93%, and we saved over 40,000 tonnes of carbon based on an equivalent new build.
So how did British Land and Arup approach sustainability? First, they reused as much of the original building as they could. If you look around, you can see where the original structure in white ends and the new space begins. But one of the highlights is the facade.
We believe it was a first in the construction world, certainly on buildings of this scale and certainly within the London market. Typically for a building that is 20, 25 years old, when it comes to the point of refurbishment, often you'll be looking at replacing the facade and stripping the building back to its frame. That was the initial starting point.
Speaking to Arup, British Land realized they could dismantle the 3,500 square meter facade piece by piece, refurbish it in a pop-up factory 30 miles away, and put it back on the building. That cost them 66% less than a new facade would have done. In total, British Land estimates it saved about 20% on costs and cut embodied carbon by about 56% compared to a new build by keeping the structures it could. Next, it was a question of using greener, stronger materials.
Once we got the big wins of retaining the existing structure and the embodied carbon that came with that, we had an interesting process that happened on the facade. There were some big wins there, but then to push the project as far as we could, we had to start literally leaving no stone unturned.
For example, columns in the building were wrapped in carbon fiber for added strength. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Some of the columns didn't have the structural integrity they needed. So instead, British Land had to wrap them in concrete.
But what we were able to do was use 70% cement replacement products. So we've got a very low carbon solution to that additional concrete that we then had to put back into the building.
That low carbon alternative replaced 70% of the cement they needed to use at Triton Square. By strengthening its columns, British Land was able to add 3 floors without sacrificing a lot of floor space for more structural support. This was all part of the mantra of marginal gains in the building. Make small changes that add up over time. Other things that fit that mantra include 360 meters of green space that wraps around the building. All around One Triton Square, there are places to perch with a bit of quiet and greenery away from the main roads.
In the hunt for as much as we possibly could, every square inch of space was utilised to add in our greening factor.
Meta is now gearing up for its fit-out, and One Triton Square is now on the cusp of being an operational building. It might still largely be empty, remnants of construction equipment still lying around, but it's not too soon to learn a few lessons. 1. Cutting carbon in retrofits isn't easy. When he talks about the development, Tim describes it as complex.
It's not necessarily a simpler way of approaching it. You know, it's easy just to throw up a new steel frame and a Meccano set and start from scratch. But that is typically more expensive. This was complicated, but we're starting with the benefit of having a huge amount of structure already present on site, which saved us both time and cost in materials that were already here.
2. Putting in effort does make a difference. One Triton Square achieved a BREEAM outstanding rating. British Land pushed Arup to bring the design up from excellent to outstanding. Doing so cost just 0.3% more in capex, considerably less than the expected 5%. 3. Tenants want offices with green credentials. Sustainability was high on Meta's agenda. Instead of picking up space in a new development, it chose One Triton Square. For British Land, that's a sign of things to come.
I think we're yet to see premiums added onto rents yet for sustainability, but we're probably seeing more a two-tier market that appears, with buildings with less sustainable credentials taking a lot longer to let and are probably going to end up in a world where they're more isolated or stranded, and it will be buildings like this that are in the future far more attractive to investors.
British Land has shown that meeting that demand isn't always straightforward, but given the cost and carbon savings, it's undoubtedly the way forward. For more on One Triton Square, click the link in the video description or visit PlaceTech.net.